Right, Shalom. First, I'd like to give all praises unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GreatMillStone, and honors to you brothers out there in the highways and the byways teaching this word in all sincerity and in truth. And I just want to quickly go into the Brexit, for brothers who don't know what's going on. Prophecy being fulfilled. These Edomites basically turning against themselves, being caught in great confusion. All right. Now this is Job 12:23. It says, "He increaseth the nations and decreaseth them." Oh, sorry, not decreaseth, and destroyeth them. All right. He enlargeth the nations and straighteneth them again. So Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, he is in control of the rise and the fall of nations. And when a nation is to rise, there ain't nobody who can stop the rise of that nation. All right, no matter what that nation do, it's going to rise. And the same is, for the opposite of that. When a nation is to fall, it doesn't matter what they think or what they do. Every move they make, every step they take is going to lead to their own downfall. And that's what Esau, the position Esau's finding himself in. And once you're on the way down, there's no witchcraft and then there's no wisdom that you can utilize. There's no sword that you can use that's going to undo what has been done. Once the Most High take that juice away, you can't get that juice back. Now, Britain represents the seventh head of the dragon. And they had their time as the head. They had their time on top of the game, so to speak. All right. Prior to World War I, going back into the British Empire, all right, they had their short space, as the scriptures say. The pound was the world reserve currency. The British Navy was feared. They had the gunboat diplomacy. The other Edomite nations had to respect Britain. This is Revelations, namely Germany, France. All right, Revelation 17:10. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Right? The one that had not yet come was the British Empire. The Edomites as the British Empire. It says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition." So America came out of the British Empire. And that's why Britain has enjoyed what's known as the special relationship. Right? But nevertheless, America after World War I became supreme over all the other Edomite nations, including Britain. And they took the place as being that whore that sitteth on the beast. And then shortly thereafter, you had the 10 horns, which Britain is one of those 10 horns and those 10 kings. They came together as NATO and the EU, and they had power together with the beast. Right? It says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no power as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." So what does that mean? America with the NATO and the EU have had a stranglehold on the rest of the world. And all these different nations in the EU and in NATO and America have benefited from that arrangement. Okay, including Britain, who benefited more than most. Why? Because on their own, Britain is nowhere near as powerful, as influential as what they are as part of the EU and NATO together, with the special relationship they have in America. Basically, they've been punching above their weight ever since they joined the EU and NATO. They've been punching above their weight. Now, the position that Britain is finding himself in at the moment is they've opted to leave the EU. And not only are they finding that in trying to bully the EU into giving them a favorable deal, so to speak, that the EU ain't budging because they're not afraid of Britain. their butt buddy, America, has turned their back on them and has openly declared that their priority is a trade deal with the EU and not with the UK. So right now, Britain is looking far from strong and far from glorious. They're looking very pitiful and weak right now. And I can only imagine that Vladimir Putin is laughing his head off. The only thing that's saving Britain right now is the fact that they're in the NATO. Okay, they're in NATO, but pretty much it's being shown to the whole world, including all these Commonwealth nations that at one time Britain lorded over, that Britain is finished. All right, and there's more to come. So what I want to do, I want to just bring out the information. What happened with the Lisbon Treaty? Now, the Lisbon Treaty, when you sign on to the Lisbon Treaty, you become part of the European Union. You accept all the treaties and the agreements and the legislations and statutes and all these different things you incorporate yourself into, okay? You become basically a state of Europe. All right, the EU is basically the United States of Europe. Now, what happened is Britain had a referendum, and many British people basically, they pushed for Britain to become sovereign, so-called sovereign, make their own decisions. They can rejuvenate themselves and rejuvenate the empire, beginning with the Commonwealth. They can stand on their own like they used to, blah, 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 blah. Okay, get rid of these foreigners. And fair enough. But now it's being seen that anyone with two eyes in their head that is not totally filled with hubris and pride can see that Britain have shot themselves in the leg through their own pride. But let's read about Article 50. It says any member state may decide to withdraw from the Union in accordance with its own constitutional requirements. A member state which decides to withdraw shall notify the European Council of its intention. In the light of the guidelines provided by the European Council, the Union shall negotiate and conclude an agreement with that state, setting out the arrangements for its withdrawal. And that's all the EU are entitled to do. The only thing the EU is entitled to do is negotiate the money that Britain owes them, and they may negotiate some security agreements, and that's it. All right, but Britain are trying to push the EU to do more than what the EU is willing to do, and the EU ain't budged for a year and a half. All right, that agreement shall be negotiated in accordance with Article 218 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. It shall be concluded on behalf of the Union by the Council, acting by a qualified majority after obtaining the consent of the European Parliament. The treaties shall cease to apply. So on March the 29th, all treaties and agreements that Britain have with the EU and through the EU with any other nations is going to cease to apply. That includes the free trade that Britain enjoys with Europe, and the freedom of movement that Britain enjoys with Europe at the moment, as well as the 34 trade agreements that the EU has with over 60 countries, including the latest free trade deal that the EU just signed with Japan. Britain will no longer be party to any of these trade deals. In fact, they will have no trade deals in operation, and they will be trading purely under the WTO guideline, which is suicide, if you understand these things. All right, the treaties shall cease to apply to the state in question from the date of entry into the force of the withdrawal agreement, or failing that 2 years after, 29th of March, the notification referred to in paragraph 2, unless the European Council, in agreement with the member state concerned, unanimously decides to extend this period, which the EU, I highly doubt, will extend the periods of negotiations. Because why? They really don't have anything to negotiate. The only thing the EU want more than anything is the money that they're owed, and that's it. And all right, and right now Britain's trying to threaten the EU that they ain't gonna pay them the money if the EU don't bow to their demands. Well, it's not going to happen, my friend. Now, let's get you up to speed on what's going on here. So, the Britain has spent the last year and a half not only fighting with the EU, but also fighting between themselves about what type of Brexit they want to try and get with the EU. Now, in reality, there is only one type of Brexit available, and that's what is stated in Article 50, that they shall be no longer party to any treaty. But what Britain is trying to do, they're trying to negotiate themselves with the EU in a position where they get to keep some of the perks of membership, either temporary or indefinitely, but not be a member. So let's look at this, man. Soft Brexit, but remember, in reality, there is only one type of Brexit, and that's what Article 50 states. So all this negotiation stuff is just folly. All these things that Britain is going to lose out hurts Britain more than it hurts the EU. And this is why the EU are laughing at Britain. and I'm laughing at Britain, and it's a beautiful thing to me. See, at the moment, Britain enjoys trade with countries through the EU, but once the Brexit happens, Britain will not have any trade deals with any nation, so they will now have to start negotiating these trade deals. Now, once they start negotiating all these different trade deals, not only are they going to be negotiating from a position of weakness, but also these trade deals can be blocked by other countries that have trade deals with the other party. It's going to become very difficult, and while they're trying to negotiate these trade deals, they're going to be open to ridiculous tariffs. It's finished. It's over. Hard Brexit, so-called. Now they want to try, and Theresa May with this Chequers agreement is trying to put together a soft Brexit, which you got a lot of people in Britain that in their ignorance, it goes two ways. If you understand what's going on, one, the soft Brexit is impossible. The EU will not accept this, period. But there's certain people in Britain that they understand that you can't just leave the EU and not have none of the benefits just like that in one day. It's too much of a car crash. All right, so they're trying to negotiate this soft Brexit. But then you got these other Edomites in Britain who like, look, to hell with that. They're so proud, they don't even want to try and get something out of the EU. They say they just want to leave the EU straight up because they believe in Britain, and they believe that Britain basically is going to reestablish itself as the British Empire by itself. So on all levels, they're through, if you understand what I'm saying. They don't want to be subject to any EU laws, but they want the perks of the membership. So this situation is basically, if you understand that the negotiations are not going to go anywhere, so a no deal is 99%. All right. Now let's bring it to my man. Let's understand the trade deal.
Italian fabrics, Japanese Kobe beef, American cars. Where there are goods, there's trade. Trade deals make it easier and cheaper for countries to trade with one another. They're not necessary, but there's a price to pay if you don't have one. Countries generally slap an extra charge on foreign products.
Which, like I said, Britain won't have any once March the 29th comes into play.
When they cross the border. Free trade deals can get rid of these tariffs, pushing prices down and giving customers better access to foreign goods. They can strengthen diplomatic ties. Almost every country in the world has them. Around 230 went into force between 2000 and 2016, according to the World Trade Organization. So, how do they work? Let's say two or more countries, country A, country B, and country C, decide they want a deal. They gather important people around a table, lawyers, negotiators, regulators, and they hammer out the details. They'll work out the different sectors they want to focus on and discuss ways to align their industry rules. Leaders give their stamp of approval, and generally, lawmakers have to ratify everything. But it takes time. Modern, large-scale trade deals between multiple countries can take years to sign, and there's a lot of back and forth. The recent free trade deal between Canada and the European Union took nearly a decade to sign. Even smaller trade deals can often take a year or two. But not everyone's a fan. Critics say it's better when the tariffs are in place and everyone minds their own business. They say cheap foreign products drown out domestic industry and hurt local jobs. But when trade barriers go up, countries can hurt themselves, leading to higher prices, potential shortages, and unhappy customers. With Britain leaving the EU and President Donald Trump promising to put America first, trade deals will be front and center for the next few years.
Okay. And then, you know, just to give you an example, the EU just did a free trade agreement with Japan. Okay, which is built into the trade deal. Like, if Britain try and go and do a deal with EU and Japan, if it affects this deal, they could block it. So the situation that they put themselves in.
The European Union and Japan have just signed a widespread trade deal that will eliminate nearly all tariffs. Both sides are heralding the deal, which covers a third of the global economy and more than 600 million people. I'm joined now by Euronews' Brian Carter in Brussels. Brian?
And that's what Britain just took themselves out of. At the end of the day, if you want to trade, the number one bloc to trade with on the earth is the EU. Point blank period, because they got most of the money. All right, 27 out of the 35 advanced economies in the world are in the EU. The rest of the world is broke. Let's just keep it real. All right, you can't compare when it comes to wealth and money. You just can't compare. All right, now I want to finish up with this my man Michel Barnier, man. All right, well, actually I got another one after. Now Michel Barnier, like I said, in these negotiations, Britain is, which I got an article as well, I forgot. Britain are basically trying to have their cake and eat it. They want the EU to help them. They want the EU to basically allow them benefits of membership without having the membership, which the EU can't and will not allow, which is why they haven't changed their stance in the last year and a half. And Britain, in their pride, are now basically still trying to force the EU to change their stance, even threatening that they won't pay the bill between 39 to 70 billion that they owe, in order to push the EU to make it easier to ease the pain of Britain leaving the union. Okay, and then now you got another side of the Edomites over here who basically are just saying straight up they want a no-deal Brexit, and that a no-deal Brexit is better for Britain. This is the madness. But listen to my man Michel Barnier. He gonna say it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the VIP corner for this press point with Michel Barnier. Also, the EU respects the choices made by the UK government. We can find common ground based on the EU principles on the one hand, and on the other hand, the choices made by the UK.
Okay, and that's all he's saying. And he's been saying this for a year and a half. In these negotiations, the negotiations have to respect the fact that Britain have decided to leave the EU. So the EU will respect that fact, and they will make whatever concessions they can. But the concessions they won't make is to the principles of the EU, the 4 pillars of the EU, which Britain want to pick and choose from.
As I said in July, we are far more advanced in defining that common ground for foreign policy and security than for the economic relationship.
That's right. The foreign policy and the security are easy stuff. But the economic relationship surrounds those 4 pillars, man, and there's not going to be nothing to hide. And so let me get this article because it's going to explain the situation a lot better. All right. It says the UK's latest Brexit proposal is unrealistic, says EU officials. EU sources have seen drafts of the white paper say proposals will never be accepted. And this is talking about the Chequers Agreement, which is the latest agreement that Theresa May has drawn up, which even here in Britain, a lot of these British people aren't happy with the Chequers Agreement because they don't want nothing to do with the EU whatsoever. So this is the madness that we're dealing with. On one hand, you got the UK, certain people in the UK who want to keep one foot in the EU, and you got another group who want to completely come out of the EU. But the 1 foot situation is not going to happen. They're going to come out either way, and it's going to be to the destruction of Britain. A draft of Theresa May's Brexit plan has already been dismissed as unrealistic by senior EU officials, who say the UK has no chance of changing the European Union's founding principles. And isn't that what Barnier just repeated not too long ago? They haven't changed their stance, and they're not going to change. The Prime Minister is gathering her squabbling ministers at Chequers on Friday for 1 day, which this has already happened. This is going back just under 2 months ago, for a 1 day discussion to thrash out the UK's future relationship with the EU. But the EU sources who have seen drafts of the long-awaited British white paper said the proposals would never be accepted. We read the white paper and we read cake. An EU official told The Guardian a reference to Boris Johnson's one-liner of being pro having cake and pro eating it. Yeah, these British devils were being hella proud. They thought that they could have their cake and eat it, man. No. Since the British EU, they thought they were special. Basically, these devils thought they think they're special, man. These British devils think they're special, but they're not that special. Okay? And they're going to find out that time is against them. The times is against them, man. The will of the Lord is against them. And it's against the EU too, because they're going down. All you Edomite nations, it's your time to go down. No matter what you do, down is the only way. All right. Since the British EU referendum, cake has entered the Brussels lexicon to describe anything seen as unrealistic or far-fetched demand. May's white paper is expected to propose the UK remaining indefinitely in a single market for goods after Brexit to avoid the need for checks at the Irish border. While the UK is offering concessions on financial services, it wants restrictions on free movement of people, a long-standing no-go for the EU. So basically, they want to pick and choose between what they want to accept from the EU. Jean-Claude Paris, a former head of the EU Council's legal service, said it would be impossible for the EU to split the 4 freedoms underpinning the bloc's internal market, which are written into the 1955 treaty that founded the European project: free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. Okay, you can't have one without the other. And that's what Britain is trying to push for, but it's not going to happen. So the inevitability is no deal. And they're going to go out the hard way, which they haven't been preparing for. They've had a year and a half to prepare, and they've got another 6 months to go, and they haven't even begun to prepare for what's about to happen. Chaos. All right? Now, I want to get this one right here. See, because all the wolves and the sharks, man, they're going to devour Britain. They're going to devour Britain, man. And the pound is going to fall. See, these Edomites, man, they're not friends, man. These Edomites are not their brother's keeper. And you best believe that a lot of these nations hate the prideful way. Not only do they hate America, but the second most hated nation after America is Britain. There's some proud beasts, man.
Is France pushing for a hard Brexit in order to weaken the City of London? A leaked report published Sunday shows that one of the UK's leading financial frontmen to the EU seems to think so. On Sunday, the Daily Mail in the UK published a leaked memo, which paints a picture that France is attempting to use Brexit negotiations aggressively to its advantage in order to weaken the UK and the City of London. The contents are written by Jeremy Brown, a former minister and currently the city's Brexit envoy to the EU. The memo was written for ministers about his recent trip to France and about his meetings with the French Central Bank, which is closely tied with the ECB. Brown writes in his memo, "The meeting with the French Central Bank was the worst I have had anywhere in the EU. They are in favor of the hardest Brexit. They want disruption." Brown acknowledged that there may be political benefits to France playing bad cop in the EU's Brexit negotiations. But he states, "We should nevertheless have our eyes open, that France sees Britain and the City of London as adversaries, not partners." Even more to the point, Brown continues to state that they are crystal clear about their underlying objectives, the weakening of Britain and the ongoing degradation of the City of London.
It's going to be the first time that the French have undermined the British. Let's go back into the inception of America. Was it not the French that helped with the revolution?
The French Central Bank on Monday denied that the meeting had any sort of aggressive undertones and said there had been no controversial intentions such as those described by Brown in the memo. However, they somewhat ominously responded with this: "We remind them of our position that Great Britain has unfortunately chosen a hard Brexit. The City of London therefore loses its European passport and some financial activities connected to the euro will relocate to the continent. It's a question of consistency," said a spokesperson to France 24 who asked to remain anonymous. What the French Central Bank means by this is that Brexit has opened up opportunities in the European Union, some of the most obvious being the migration of financial services and corporate headquarters to European capitals. Much of this is based on the question of passporting, which
a lot of companies, a lot of manufacturers that are based in the Europe, in the EU, in Britain right now, are gonna leave Britain because they want to have easy access to the EU. So guess what? They're gonna move. They're gonna leave Britain. All these doctors and nurses that came to Britain, they're gonna leave too because they're EU citizens. They're gonna go back. Britain's gonna be in a pitiful state, man.
allows financial services to manage clients throughout the European Union regardless of nation state. The question of how this will continue to apply in the UK after Brexit is under debate. European governments, including that of France, have been taking advantage of the opportunities this creates for investment into their countries. For example, in October, France's financial center, La Défense, launched a PR campaign which went, "Tired of the fog? Try the frog," aimed at attracting companies across the channel. Earlier this month, the French Prime Minister laid out a raft of measures aimed at boosting Paris's competitiveness. Importantly, Theresa May has also downplayed the importance of this memo. What it does show is that the uncertainty created by Brexit is already having a serious impact on relations between the EU and the UK. The UK's bread and butter is a services-based economy, much of which is done through the EU. With this seemingly under threat, it's anyone's guess what future Brexit negotiations will look like.
Britain on the losing end. Exactly what's going down out here, man. Now I got one more clip I want to play. Then I'm gonna get some scriptures and get out of here, man. Yeah, chickens are coming home to roost.
So I'm never really sure whether or not this is an honest to God actual position these people actually hold, or whether these people are just generally trolling. Because time and time again on my channel, I get bizarre comments that somehow Britain leaving the European Union is somehow going to magically reignite the British Empire, and that we are somehow going to become this magical, all-powerful trading nation that hasn't existed before World War I. Now, why is this? Well, to understand this, you've really got to understand the British educational system. Because the British Empire, especially taught in secondary schools, if it's on that curriculum, and especially in private schools, is taught that the British Empire's downfall was essentially really a bad thing, and that the world was somehow poorer for it. And it's more a really sanitized version of actual history, because none of the courses or anything like that go into the bad things that the British Empire did, such as causing genocide, massive hunger problems, especially in places like India, completely unequal trade because of, military power. And these people just don't seem to understand the actual history. Now, I'm going to give it what is a very quickly really brief run over, especially in this history. And I recommend that if you are...
Yeah, so these devils are proud. You know how these devils operate, man. There's Psalms 36:2. These devils, man, they're proud. They're in denial. All right, they're in complete denial about where they are. All right, Psalms 36:2. For he flattereth himself in his own eyes, until his iniquity be found to be hateful. That's these devils, man. They flatter themselves. They really think that they're the shit, and they're so proud that they really think they ain't gonna fall. Like they gonna catapult themselves back up to greatness. Nah. Let me get a scripture for you Edomites, because this goes for all you Edomite nations. Every single last one of you Edomite nations, man. This applied to Israel at one time, and now it applies to you. None of you nations, I don't care if it's America, Russia, France, Germany, Australia, you Edomites, whatever you got going for you right now, it's all going to come to an end. All right? It's all going to come to an end. All right? Russia ain't gonna catapult itself into greatness and glory. America ain't gonna get back the glory days, and neither is France, Germany, and none of these devils. You're all going down in fire and blood. Ezekiel 7:6. An end is come, the end is come, it watcheth for thee, behold, it is come. And it's gonna be the end of all of the houses of Esau. You're going to be broken down and destroyed on this earth. All the heads, all the horns, the entire beast is going to be broken down and dismantled, man. You're going into slavery, and then every single Edomite is going to be exterminated. Right? None of your institutions are going to be left standing. Governmental, NGO, it don't matter what it is. Corporation, the Lord is going to break it all down. He's going to bring it all to the ground. All right, point blank, period. Right, and all this infighting you doing, Britain against the EU and France and these guys, and you got even the Edomites within Britain fighting. Hey, what did Yahushua say about a house divided against itself? The EU bickering with America. Look, man, the EU and America together, that was your last hurrah. When you start breaking apart, that's the end. And that's the end of all of you, especially America. This is Luke 11:17. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? Because you say that I cast out devils through Beelzebub. Now, Satan goes into you so-called white people, man. You're the devil that the Bible speaks of. You're the adversary, and you are being divided against yourself. All right, and Britain, it's the through K, man. They ain't the UK, it's the through K. You done. And it's all right. You can take comfort in that you ain't gonna go down alone. All you devils is going down, and the war is coming. All right, you devils are all gonna get stripped. You're gonna get backed against the wall, and you're gonna have to fight. And that fight is gonna be your last. So with that, I'm gonna say Shalom.